All right, you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, today is Monday, May 25th, 2015, and this is episode 118 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Hey, Jerry, and although it's odd, weird thing to say, happy Memorial Day. Happy thinking about all the people who've died for us.
And you as well.
I guess.
And you. That's right.
It's not Think of Vet Day, that's Veterans Day.
Right. It's thank those who have sacrificed for you.
So get a Ouija board out and commune with a dead soldier.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's move on.
Hate mail should go to jerry@defensivesecurity.org. No, but seriously, I have nothing but the utmost respect and appreciation to armed forces, and especially those who have sacrificed for us.
Absolutely.
And such that it makes me sad to see how we're giving up our freedoms in the name of safety. Anyway, carrying on.
Indeed. So first order of business is that the opinions we express, especially tonight, the opinions we express on this podcast are ours and do not represent those of our employer. The second order of business is a reminder that the High Tech Crime Investigation Association conference is coming up. Oh, let's see. When is it? It is coming up August 30th through September 2nd in Orlando, Florida. You can use the discount code Defensive Security to get 10% off the $750 ticket price. Looks like a pretty good conference. Be there. I will be announcing the winner of the giveaway ticket later this week on Twitter, so watch for it. I meant to do it already, but life gets in the way. So,
and for those who like to plan ahead, Hack in the Box next year.
That's right.
You and I may be there.
That is very true, and I think it's actually is it this weekend or next weekend?
Yeah, it's going on right now.
That's right.
We have met, or at least virtually met, one of the organizers, and we may have a discount code for next year. We'll see.
That's right. Absolutely.
And travel over to ye olde Amsterdam.
Which is, by the way, an absolutely beautiful place.
I have never been. I would like to go. That sounds fun. Hopefully work will allow such a thing.
All right. Well, let's jump into our stories. Today's my son's birthday, so I want to get onto that.
Happy birthday to your son.
Thank you. It's the big driver's license birthday. So.
Wow.
Yikes! Yeah.
Is he getting his license right away?
Well, in Georgia, they do. You have to get a learner's permit for a year, where you have to drive with a licensed adult. So he'll be getting that, and then.
So he's turning 15?
Turning 15, that's right. And then when he turns 16, he can get his full license.
Now, does he have to log a certain amount of time with a driver in this next year?
That's not clear, not very clear to me. But just for the sake of pragmatism, we're gonna have him drive quite a lot.
And you often have wanted a chauffeur.
I have. I have.
Excellent. All right.
So, let's jump into our stories. The first one tonight comes from the Symantec Response blog, and the title is Check Your Sources, Trojanized Open Source SSH Software Used to Steal Information. And this is a story that's been making the rounds about a Trojanized version of PuTTY. I think most people know that PuTTY is a open-sourced version of an SSH client that is very commonly used throughout the world. And apparently what happened here is that back in 2013, some nefarious cyber attacker released a customized version, a recompiled version of PuTTY with a little added extra that steals credentials. So if you log into a server, it actually pings out to a command and control system with the username, password, and host name that you're connecting to, which is just awesome. And that apparently it's not incredibly widespread. It's not really clear how widespread it is, but the Symantec here is claiming that they had first seen this back in 2013, and it's kind of been intermittently seen, but apparently recently there's been a significant uptick in their encounters with it. Their hypothesis is that the author of this thing has been I don't know, working out the kinks with command and control. I don't really know. It doesn't sound very complicated to me, but apparently it's somewhat easy to recognize this as fake because it's larger than the official version in size, and also the about screen is slightly different. So, probably both things that you really wouldn't think to look at if you just randomly went and downloaded it off the internet, which apparently is the problem. So you really, and by the way, I think this is, again, part of a larger problem we have with the provenance of software from the internet, and kind of potentially, as much as I hate to say it, one of the benefits of the whole App Store model.
Yeah, this is nothing new. This has been a problem for years and years and years and years. I'm not sure why this is getting so much press. And when I read this story, I went, okay.
Well, I think the reason is that it's this
started with shareware back in the 90s.
I know, but this is stealing usernames and passwords on Linux and servers.
You have to verify where you're downloading your software from. I mean, come on.
I know.
This is 101 stuff.
I know.
It's silly.
It also they mention that PuTTY is often trusted, and I hope people or organizations who have implemented some kind of trust model around software that's allowed and not allowed are not solely relying on the name of the package, and maybe using things like hashes or
not that those can't defeat that with collisions and all, but still, it makes it a lot harder.
It's a lot harder.
Yeah, I agree. I'm puzzled by this being such a big deal. Well, it's a good reminder. It is a good reminder. Back in the day, we used to verify things with, MD5 hashes to make sure we got uncorrupted, clean copies of things. But
which you got from the same site which you got from the same site you downloaded the software, which is totally awesome.
Well, the first damn thing is when you go to download PuTTY and you do a Google search, right? The story is all they unintentionally clicked on a corrupted site. I'm like, they didn't unintentionally click on jack shit. They clicked on a site that wasn't the official PuTTY site because they didn't read Google properly. So this is a failure of Google comprehension.
I can't argue with that.
So I'm not saying they get what they deserve at all. I'm not blaming the victim here. But I'm saying the problem is that people are going to unofficial sites and, they're going to, freesoftwareforyou.com download site and grabbing it. Now, to be fair, lots of bad guys will try to manipulate the Google rankings to get their malicious site higher up, the rankings. But come on, go find the official PuTTY site and stop being silly.
Yep.
So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Wow. How do you really feel? So
it is a problem. It is a problem. But it seems like a solvable problem if people take another second to think about the site they're getting it from. But I agree with you, the App Store model. But again, this goes back to signing and that sort of stuff, which we have seen also corrupted. But it's raising the bar. It makes it a lot harder.
Right. Yep. All right, so moving on to our next story, which comes from the Naked Security blog, and the title is, oh my goodness, Anatomy of a Logjam. Another TLS vulnerability. And
so many toilet jokes.
And it has a name, but no logo. So obviously it's serious, but not that serious.
Did it have its own marketing site put together by a marketing group that,
kind of
is more concerned about page hits than
no
credibility?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they didn't. I don't think they registered their own domain for it. So, anyway,
some marketing group missed an opportunity.
I know. So the story here is, yet again, one more, chalk another one up for government intervention in, back in the 90s crypto war time where the U.S.
Man, I don't know about I lost an arm in the crypto wars. I don't know about you.
You got that cyber arm going? Oh boy, yeah. Let's just leave that.
What led to the cyber arms race.
That's right. Boy, that could have gone. That could have gone really horribly.
And then the enhanced cyber llamas rose up.
Yep. So the deal here is that this is yet another issue involving export grade crypto, kind of like Freak was, but this is slightly different. Whereas Freak attacked the implementation of TLS, this is actually just a fundamental problem in the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. And apparently it will let an attacker who has the ability to sit in the middle of your communication SSL, or I guess we have to call it TLS now, right? We got to retire SSL, who can sit in the middle of your TLS session. They can effectively kind of play both sides and end up with a 512-bit key that's relatively easy to decrypt using Amazon Web Services. And they kind of go on a little farther, which is interesting, and draw a somewhat, I would say, interesting view that this particular attack methodology may actually be what's been referenced in some of the Edward Snowden documents about how the NSA and other intelligence agencies actually is able to decrypt VPN traffic. So I'm not to go off the deep end on that particular topic, but cryptography is hard, and here is yet another example. The solution, by the way, really is again to turn off those stinking export ciphers,
and never intentionally degrade encryption again.
Yes, which apparently we have not yet learned.
No, we haven't. And it's kind of like inflation. Computers are going to keep getting faster, and CPUs are going to keep getting stronger. So if you forget that lesson, these things are going to keep happening.
You know what?
In fact, the next time you're designing an enterprise architecture for widely used encryption like TLS, plan to have to upgrade that thing every couple of years and build that into your model.
Yes, that was exactly what I was going to say.
Sorry.
You're right on. This is this kind of points out the fact that the fact that you still have these 512-bit capacity for handling 512-bit keys in this crypto kind of points out a fundamental problem in our software model, or just the internet in general, that once something's in there, it's really hard to get it back out. It just hangs on, and in order, especially for crypto, I mean, maybe other things aren't quite so problematic, but with crypto, you kind of do have to keep moving the bar over time, and we're not. I guess we've done that a little bit with certificates going from 1024-bit to 2048, but that's, as we're seeing now, that's actually not where a lot of the problem space is sitting. So anyhow,
yeah, it's an interesting one, and like we're seeing with Poodle, if you've got a ton of embedded code or really stubborn code to swap out that's reliant on SSL version whatever that is now vulnerable, you're making life very difficult for yourself to fix that. And so if you're going through and fixing that now, realize that probably something else is going to happen where you're going to swap out that code or upgrade that code again, and try to build that sort of flexibility into your model.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, it's getting harder and harder and harder, in my view at least, to come up with a configuration of TLS that actually doesn't have, problems with crime and freak and poodle, and that. I think there's a couple of websites out there that actually will give you the current recommended configuration for cipher suites and things like that. It's probably worth taking a look at because, for the most part, what was the default configuration is not acceptable anymore, and that keeps changing. So you may want to just, I don't know, put on your calendar every 6 months or a year to go check on what you should be doing.
The upside is I kind of appreciate this research coming out and showing us these vulnerabilities so that we can try to keep our encrypted sessions encrypted, as opposed to the government just sitting on these things and we don't know about it.
Absolutely. So, all right, moving on to our next story.
Well,
go ahead.
Any advice? The only advice I would give is a lot of vulnerability scanners will now check for logjam, and there's also some free scanners out there. Go find this stuff and swap out your crypto ciphers.
That's right.
That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, this is kind of lather, rinse, repeat from a number of the other previous vulnerabilities, like Freak. You got to go and figure out what the right the set of cipher suites are and minimum key lengths. So.
Yep.
All right, now we're moving on to Krebs on security, and the story here is CareFirst Blue Cross breach hits $1.1 million or 1.1 million people, not dollars. We don't know how much money yet. So not a ton of information about what actually happened, except that CareFirst issued a statement last Wednesday that attackers had gained access to names, birth dates, email addresses, and insurance identification numbers. And apparently not among the breach data was Social Security or credit card numbers. However, what are they offering? Drum roll, please.
Oh, let me guess. Credit monitoring.
Yes! You got it.
That's innovative.
You got it. I swear, I still say credit monitoring companies are the place to invest your money. It is a growth market.
So I want to know, serious question. How often do credit monitoring services have a collision where some previous breach has already gotten a certain customer X covered by this credit monitoring, and a new breach comes up that also affects customer X, and that credit monitoring service goes, well, you're already covered, we'll just extend your service?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. There has been a lot of jokes about, kind of banking them up. Sure.
You could have pretty much lifetime credit monitoring for all the good it'll do you.
Yeah. Between Home Depot and Target and Anthem, and I've got credit monitoring for a number of years. So anyway, again, there's not a lot of detail about how actually this happened. However, apparently there's a little bit of an inkling of how it may have happened, because if you think back to the Anthem breach and to the Primera breach, both earlier in the year, there was apparently some, I guess for lack of a better term, phishing domains set up for them, registered through a domain registrar in China, and they were kind of look-alike domains, right? So WellPoint had two number ones instead of L's, and they had DNS structure that kind of mirrored, again allegedly, what the company used for like remote access services and different things. And Primera had the same thing where they used two N's instead of an M. And now somebody found that there was two domains for CareFirst, which kind of followed the same type of a model, using an L instead of an I and a number 1 instead of an I in the word first. So, the presumption is that, hey, this is it probably followed a similar model. If in fact, this is the same attacker. Obviously, you don't know. We don't have any other detail about how they entered, but I think it's becoming kind of a well-worn path. Now, what's interesting is that they've also uncovered another domain for Empire Blue, which uses a number 1 instead of an L in the word blue. And the thing that struck me about this story is, again, it's not incredibly interesting, except we got to banter about credit monitoring, which is fun. Is there some, kind of going back to the whole threat intelligence brouhaha, is there some benefit or some way to look at our organization's domains and detect when something like this pops up? I don't know the answer to that, right?
What do you mean? Pop up like as in a third-party monitoring service that's or some piece of software that's monitoring for
lookalike domains.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that too. I think it makes sense for any large organization to probably just go and register common lookalike domains or typo domains or that sort of thing as a primary thing. But in theory, SSL is supposed to verify this. But
yeah, but
at the same time, you could just create a certificate with the misspelling, and
exactly.
The SSL cert's going to come up clean. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I think it's probably on major organizations to try to be cognizant of this problem, go register and typo squat on those common domains that somebody like this would probably stand up, and just preemptively grab them.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that there's depending on how long your name is, right? There's potentially an almost limitless set of possible misspellings. And it's really, really difficult. So I guess my question is more along the lines of, hey, here's an opportunity for here's a business opportunity, right? To look for this sort of thing, on behalf of a company.
Interesting. Along those lines is that as difficult it is for a company to think to register those, I'm trying to figure out how a business would figure out these sorts of things as well.
There's lots of creative people.
Yeah, you're right. Just because we can't think of it on the fly without spending any time on it doesn't mean somebody else can.
Exactly.
So, or can't, I should say.
Anyway, so yeah, that was the I think the point I wanted to make is it's becoming apparently a thing. So kind of watch for that. All right, and our last story is kind of long and complicated. So
now you may think this topic has died down.
Oh no. But you would be wrong.
I think it's just getting started.
Yeah. So the story here, and this comes from Forbes.com, and the title is Bomb supplies, commandeered cars and planes, dangerous tweets for alleged flight hacker. And it's in true Forbes form. It's a rather long read and includes some of the more interesting tweets made by Mr. Chris Roberts over the past number of years, including such gems as where he turned his Ford rental car back in and hoped that the rental car company didn't mind that he swapped out the entertainment center with one running Linux, or I should say installed Linux on the entertainment console.
We should remind folks, if you don't know who Chris Roberts is, just in case you're new to this show or been on vacation or whatever. Chris Roberts is the guy who made the tweet on the United flight about hacking into the ECAS system. and got detained by the FBI for 4 hours. And then search warrant came out alleging all sorts of nasty things Chris Roberts said he could do. And now he's lawyered up and not really talking anymore.
And in the aftermath of that, the actual search warrant was published, allegedly, by a Canadian newspaper or news agency. Still don't know how they got their hands on it, but that actually drove quite a lot of controversy because, it alleged lots of things that Mr. Roberts reported to have said to the FBI, which, I guess was used in support of the search warrant. So things like I hacked into planes 15 or 16 times.
And most of the InfoSec world turned a dim eye upon the FBI.
Right.
For thinking that they were being overzealous and on a witch hunt and being silly.
Utilitarian in their interpretation of what Mr. Roberts had said.
However, upon further review, the wonderful thing about the internet, once something's out there on the internet, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And Mr. Roberts has a long history of saying and tweeting and speaking while recorded. And it paints an interesting picture.
Yeah.
So that's the background. Now on to the Forbes story.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, there are quite a lot. I mean, it's a very long treatise on exactly all of the shenanigans that have said, but it extends back fairly far with Mr. Roberts tweeting about taking over or did he in fact break an Airbus, right? That apparently was quote broken, sat on Airbus A320 broken, promise it's not my fault-ish. 787 lands in New Orleans. Nice of Boeing to drop me off where I'm presenting, especially as it's about them and hacking the damn thing. And then there's this gem. Air Force One is a 747-200 to be replaced by 787. Anyone guess what we can do with the FADECs?
FADEC, Full Authority Digital Engine Control.
There you go.
So basically those are the computers that control the engines.
Yep. I already mentioned the one about the entertainment system on the Ford, and then immediately following that one, apparently going back to the same con, arrived at GRRCon. Apparently rental car companies remember the last few years, and I'm only allowed non-infotainment wheel. Yeah. Spelling, misspelling, read as it appears. And then we get some really interesting ones. Mars rover Curiosity, hack in and change music playlist. Challenge accepted. Wow, that's an interesting one. I think I'm in love. Just found CERN's LHC configuration page along with the beam injectors. Man, I know what I'm doing for the 4th now. Wow. That's a good one. And then there's some that are a little more mundane, I would think, like I don't know exactly why this was thrown in here, but
because guns are bad.
Because guns are bad, right? There's a deal in Las Vegas during security summer camp where people go out into the desert and they blow stuff up and have fun. And really, who doesn't like to do that?
All completely legal.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'll skip past that.
Yeah, that's just inflammatory and silly.
So here, the next bit extracts some things that were said in conferences, and I spent earlier today trying to distill out some of the highlights for you, the audience. I'm going to play them for you now. Here we go.
Now you've got your modified program that says when the guy puts autopilot on, ignore the coordinates that he's put in there. Let's just focus on where we want to go. And by the way, when you've done that, this little analog signal over here, just continue to try and make friends with it. In fact, don't ever stop making friends with it. So the pilots go, turn this thing off, and nothing happens. So this started off as the cornfield in Kansas syndrome, which is what CFIK was. We decided we were going to pick on a couple of airports, and the math on this was a pain in the ass, which is why we never got further than basically 2 airports, one out in Denver and then one out on the East Coast. We picked on 2 airports. We figured out where the main air corridors started and where they ended up putting on autopilot. Because again, this is all public information. You don't have to do much more than do research, amazing research. Autopilot goes on at a certain altitude and it does all these things, and here's all the coordinates and here's how it's meant to work. Well, that's great. Now we'll modify it. So originally we were going to put it in a cornfield in Kansas. But eventually I figured out where Jesse lived. So then I programmed Jesse's coordinates in. So Jesse was going to get a couple of 787s and a couple of 747s buzzing his house. But he didn't like that, and he shoots better than I do. So we went back to the cornfield in Kansas. Now, how many of you guys know Nickerson? Chris Nickerson comes out of 303, our neck of the woods. Chris is a really good guy. He's also probably a little bit more of a humanitarian than I am. My idea was basically used to fly the airplane up, drop the engines, and watch it come down and see what happened. Chris figured that was a little bit too drastic and figured out that we should probably land the airplane and preserve some life. Emphasis on some life. So, again, come back to data, come back to organizations. Risk. You have to be able to quantify risk.
We need a ship. So this was Oslo again earlier this year. And I'm sitting on the quayside. And I've got a wireless antenna running, and I'm just making friends with whoever's around. And I noticed that a couple of wireless access points keep on coming in and disappearing off on a fairly cyclical basis. And I realize it's the bloody ships. I'm like, they got free Wi-Fi for people. But they don't. Their wireless access points are actually for their internal systems. So, if you can actually get one of the damn things to stay still for more than 5 minutes, and actually stay within wireless range, you can very quickly, very simply, and very easily, with the use of Backtrack and a few other things, gain access to their wireless network, crack the key that is running its WEP. It doesn't take very long to crack the damn WEP key. And now I'm on their network. So all I do is I run a quick scan across the network. We find the engine management software. It's running RDP on 3389. Takes about 2 minutes to crack the administration password. It's a derivative of the company that's running the ships. So now we're sitting on the engine management system. At which point we actually stop the engines. Again, we're trying to be ecologically friendly. So we're doing this. At this point in time, we've actually got our host from HackCon out there. And he's asking us what we're doing. We're like, see the ship? He's like, you cannot do that. We just did. You shouldn't do that. We just did. Start it up again. Working on it. I got into trouble for playing with the space station, what was that, 7, 8, 9 years? How many years ago was that? Crap. 8, 9 years ago, we messed around with the space station. We adjusted the temperature on it. It was quite fun. We got yelled at by NASA.
And so there you have it. I apologize for the quality of the audio. I did what I could to clean it up, but, there it is.
So we'll make sure we have sources for these in the show notes. These are all YouTube videos. So there was 3 different clips. The first one, obviously, the audio quality changed pretty dramatically, talking about the airplanes and autopilot. Let me address that one first. Chris has no idea what he's talking about when it comes to airline autopilots. I can't even. I'll bore the hell out of the audience, but that is not how things work. There's no spot on a chart where autopilots are turned on and turned off. And autopilots are much more sophisticated than a set of coordinates set into a little box. This is not a trivial thing that is like the GPS in your car. There's typically 3 or 4 different systems in a major aircraft, including an inertial navigation system that is calculating where the aircraft is and where it's trying to be. And the autopilot system usually has more to do with what altitude they want the aircraft to fly at, what descent or ascent rate they want the aircraft to change at, what heading they want the aircraft to be on. And autopilots typically turn on 500 to 1,000 feet off the ground on takeoff, and typically turn off about 1,000 feet off the ground. But that's completely at discretion of the flight crew. So it's just not. It really challenges the veracity of his statement, because he's not accurately understanding and communicating how a major airliner's autopilot system works. So, first off, he's just not correct. Second of all, whether he's joking or not, we're now seeing a pattern of behavior where he says that, he wants to just shut a plane's engine off and see what happens and preserve some life. Yeah, you're being edgy and snarky and cool, but let's look at all of these clips together. And I know, Jerry, I'm off my rant here. I'll give you back the mic in a minute. Then he talks about how he's sitting on the shore in Europe and hacks into a ship and turns on and off its engines. Again, without permission, without advising anybody, nor, as far as I know, ever published the proof of concept, the exploit, or the way he did it. So, clearly, at best, he has some ethical challenges here. Then he talks about hacking, quote-unquote, the space station and changing the temperature on the space station, and that NASA yelled at him. NASA's reply was that claim was laughable. Now, it's certainly not above the government to lie, but I think if someone actually had hacked the space station... Oh, and I don't think you kept the end quote in there, Jerry. I don't know if you've got it queued up, but he says on the end of it, if they're going to leave their shit open and it's not encrypted, that's their own silly fault.
Yeah, I did cut it off a little sooner. Yep.
Which I think is key to speaking to Chris's mentality. I think that's a key quote. So, in my mind, I initially defended Chris pretty heavily, and I still agree that somebody shouldn't be pulled off a flight and interrogated for 4 hours because they made a tweet. That was clearly a joke. I stand by that statement, because that could happen to any of us. And we should be free from government persecution for a statement over Twitter. And I know that there's all sorts of First Amendment, but what about fire in the theater? Go do your research. That is not a valid argument against the First Amendment, by the way. So, what we have seen, in my opinion, is that there's only one of a couple of options here. Either Chris is one of the best hackers on the planet, he has no ethics and no morals.
Well, wouldn't it be and?
Well, they're two different things.
No, I mean, but
sure.
I mean, if he can do that, I think he's got ethical lapses.
Or he's completely full of shit. And he's exaggerating to make himself look better. I'm out of other options here. So, in my mind, my sympathy for Chris is going way down very quickly. The more of these clips come out, the more of these tweets come out. The shame of this is that I personally think that he's full of crap, and that it's bad because these are legitimate research items that he is now setting this research back by years because of the way that he's approaching this. If you want a good counterexample of how to do this right, take a look at what Charlie Miller and Chris Velasic are doing with car security and car hacking. They're being very ethical about it. They're being very upfront about it. They're trying to communicate with the auto companies to try to build awareness. Now, Chris says that he has tried to communicate with the airlines, the airline manufacturers to communicate these issues. Maybe so, but now he's running around at conferences saying that he's done all this elite Uber hacksaw crap, and look how big and bad he is. So now I'm thinking that this entire search warrant that we ripped to shreds, that the FBI came out and said, oh, look at the witch, burn the witch. Now I'm wondering if this is stuff he told the FBI that he could do.
Well, it certainly seems to fit what he's said at conferences. I mean, that's kind of hard to dispute at this point. I think, maybe it's I'm in my old age. I'm growing soft. I don't know. To me, it seems like there's another, maybe not fundamentally different option, but I suspect here's my take. And by the way, I don't really know Chris at all. I think
Yeah, that's fair. I can say the same. Everything that I'm saying is based on the public view of what's being reported.
What's public? What's in the public eye? But
But that's also saying. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But it's also why I want to make sure that we publish the links to these clips so that our audience can listen to the entire clip in context.
Yeah.
And see that we are not just selectively editing.
Yeah, and they're actually embedded in the Forbes article, both of them. They're I think the first one's like 40 minutes long, and the second one's about a little over 50 minutes long. And I do invite everybody to listen to the whole thing. Here's the thing. I think that Chris, a lot of what Chris talks about is OSINT, right? So it's going out and finding information about pieces of technology. I think, right, based on what I've seen, and certainly the fact that he is, certainly has had experience apparently in the penetration testing world and whatnot, that, you can take a given piece of technology or a given system like a ship or a plane or whatever, and you can go figure out, what kinds of things are in it. And envision in your mind how they might be connected together and come up with a scenario in your mind that is concerning to you. And effectively take up a personal cause to make sure that, that these things are not putting people in danger. And so I wonder if the motivation is in fact noble, but there's actually nothing necessarily behind it, right? It's kind of all imagined scenarios, and that's kind of where we get to the point where we're talking about planes flying sideways, and autopilots being turned on and off, and changing the temperature on the space station, and things like that. Because theoretically, all that stuff is possible. Theoretically.
That's not how he's presenting it, though.
I know, and I'm right, but I think it's certainly, maybe there is some element of personal benefit in positioning it the way that he's done, but I think the other, again, assuming the moral high ground is, people are not going to take it seriously unless, he portrays it as having done it. Now, on the flip side of this, regardless of all of that, right? We have a problem in the information security world right now where this stuff is being viewed increasingly as witchcraft. We're constantly bemoaning the CFAA here in the U.S. and the persecution of hackers and things like that, and doing this sort of thing where you're effectively couching, this hacking is almost magical, right? That does not help our cause in the least. And also, it doesn't help our relationship with vendors, right? When, like Boeing or Airbus or what have you, if in fact, we're basically producing a lie, right? Because now you're putting them on the defensive, right? They don't want to play in your sandbox because you are kind of bad mouthing them, and so they're going to keep you at arm's length or as far away as they can and say, look, we got this under control. You're clearly, you just don't have it right, so go away.
So jumping off on that point, though, isn't this kind of the responsible disclosure debate where you go to a vendor and you say, look, I found this vulnerability. Here's my proof of concept code. You've got 60, 90, 30, 180 days to release a patch, or I'm going to, release my proof of concept code, kind of like Google was doing.
It is, but I think
to force that vendor to patch.
There's an important difference, though. It's a very important difference, and that is in most contemporary instances, I buy or otherwise obtain a piece of software from Microsoft or Google or SAP or Oracle or whoever, and then I go and I poke at it and I prod at it, or maybe I go and poke and prod at somebody's website as part of their bug bounty program or whatever, right? That's one thing. Poking at, intruding into the, an operating system, not the computer kind, right? But, a system like a plane or a boat or a car that doesn't belong to you, that is being used by people, is wrong, right? That is in my mind, in no way, shape, or form does that fall within the bounds of any sane definition of full disclosure.
I agree. And there is a period of time in the history of hacking where people had this idea that if I can break into it, it's my duty to break into it because you should have secured your stuff. You're bad. I think we have matured past that point. I hope we have.
Yeah.
And if you view that you're going to enhance security by burning something to the ground that doesn't belong to you to prove your point, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, and I guess kind of circling back to the point I was trying to get to with it's fine with alienating these vendors. You can't realistically you can't test about a 787. Right, in any reasonable case, without the cooperation of Boeing or an airline,
or the manufacturer of the equipment.
Yes,
right, because Boeing doesn't manufacture the avionics. And
right,
such,
right. But I assume they're the ones. They're the integrators. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe there's a third party in there too. I don't know. But it just seems to me like you have to have their support. Otherwise, the only alternative is you in fact are poking at planes as they're flying in the sky, and that's unfortunately, well, I guess I don't know, it's not really unfortunate, right? But that's a criminal act, right?
Right.
That is going to land you in prison. Period. So, end of story.
Ignoring Chris Roberts for a second and just talking about this topic. What if you are a researcher and you, without having done anything unethical or immoral, and you haven't poked at real planes, but for whatever reason, somehow, hypothetically, you've come up with information that you know that there is a vulnerability, and you try to bring this to the attention of the manufacturers, and they're ignoring you. What do you do?
Well, I think that is the full disclosure debate right there. But if that's a slightly different circumstance than you've.
I'm taking what Chris did out of the situation because I don't think what he did is appropriate or defendable anymore. What I'm saying is that I'm taking that and taking what I believe his intentions were, though his methodology was flawed, and saying, okay, if I had the same intentions, and assuming I had knowledge, which again I don't think Chris has either, but so a couple hypotheticals here. One, I'm not an asshole. Two, I actually do have legitimate knowledge of a problem. I can't really demonstrate proof of concept unless I somehow get enough credibility with the vendor to allow me to test in a controlled, safe environment, like in a ground, in a lab, something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's conceivable that those manufacturers could say to this independent researcher, "Go away, you bother me, kid." But I think that there's enough agencies out there, whether it be the NTSB, the FAA, various media outlets, that if you have a credible I'd like to think if you have a credible concern with enough knowledge, you probably could get some attention. But it's a weird, tough area to actually do any research in safely.
Yeah, that's the the unfortunate problem is that there may very well be vulnerabilities on airplanes, and there may very well be some things that have been discussed which are in fact real. The problem is they've not been properly exercised, and so now we're in this position where the focus is not on those vulnerabilities anymore. It's entirely on the drama of the story and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's not where we need to be as an industry, right? It's hard for me to say that we should never ever consider exploring vulnerabilities, because at the same time you have the problem that if you do find kind of the front door is slightly open, they're gonna, obviously the response is gonna be, yeah, but there's things behind that, right? And then unless you probe a little bit more, you're not going to be able to reasonably say, well, that's not actually true. But again, I don't know how you manage that. That's again, because you're number one, you're treading into criminal territory, and number two, you're treading into territory that's potentially putting people at risk. And that's a big ethical issue. We kind of, as in this industry, we have to have pretty good reputations. I mean, that's all we got at the end of the day is our reputation.
Yeah, I agree. And circling back around, I hate to be. I don't like when the security industry eats its own or has drama or pettiness or silliness, but I really do feel at this point that Chris is actually hurting the goals that he says he's trying to help. And I no longer feel Chris has credibility to me. And that's a shame. The other thing I want to point out is Paul Security Weekly did about a 35-minute interview with Chris. It's on episode 417 on May 7th. It's interesting. It's shout out to Paul Security Weekly, and to go watch that chunk of or the whole thing or all of their stuff. But I would love to interview Chris and ask him this stuff. But now that I'm on this record, and the fact that his lawyers told him to stop speaking about it, I doubt he would come on the show. But I would love that opportunity to give him a chance to respond, to be fair, and to have that conversation, and to really try to press him on these issues in a fair way, and see if maybe I'm just completely off base here. But right now I'm calling BS on his allegations, and I think there's something else going on here.
Yeah, I agree. And we may learn more. I mean, there's the reality of the matter is there's an ongoing investigation with the FBI, and it's not going to go away. They'll make a conclusion one way or another. I don't know how it's going to turn out, and if we're wrong, we'll be on here apologizing.
Well, yeah. I mean, as the story develops, we'll keep reporting on it.
Yeah.
I just and to be fair, by the way, I don't think these aircraft systems are perfect. I just think this is not the way to go about it.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, any last words you want to mention on this?
I'd love to hear feedback from our loyal listeners. Always happy to hear feedback, and you know where to find us. We'll sum it up at the end of the show, but I think it's just incumbent upon us as the InfoSec industry to not give credibility to those who don't deserve it.
Fair enough. And by the way, we mentioned this a little bit ago. Let's again, we don't know with certainty anything, right?
That's true.
We're making an assessment based on the data that is in front of us. But it's interesting, kind of retrospectively, to go back and look at some of those, some of those conference videos, and it makes me wonder, because a lot of conference talks have kind of salacious, are the conveyance of somewhat salacious or extraordinary experiences by pen testers or by, social engineers or what have you. And this whole thing kind of has me wondering, how often is what we hear just baloney? And then furthermore, how does that color our view of the world and what we prioritize as InfoSec practitioners?
So you're saying we should do a better job of peer reviewing talks that are being given?
I don't know. It's at this point, it's simply a question banging around in the back of my head.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. In this case, it's not like we saw proof being issued out in any of his talks. So,
yeah,
I don't know. That is a good point. It makes you question the legitimacy of talks being given at cons.
Yeah, I mean, clearly some are you can't fake some things, right? But in others that are. And I certainly am now thinking back to lots of talks that I've listened to where people have described, the experiences they've had as pen testers, especially the physical pen testers, by the way. It just makes me wonder, is it real? And I don't know. I don't know how you avoid that and still be, still have a reasonably open and accessible conference, but it's just something that strikes me as a potential hole in the bucket, so to speak. So, and potentially has significant consequences or significant implications if, in fact, that's what's happening. Because again, we are human, and these kinds of things form our view of the world and what we think is important. So, and if that's a bunch of crap, garbage in, garbage out. So, anyhow, I think we'll call it an evening with that. So, thank you again, Mr. Kellett.
Thank you, sir. I probably won't be here for your next two shows, by the way.
Yeah, I actually did want to mention, I'm not exactly sure if we will have a show next week because you'll be out and I will be in DC for the weekend. We may not, I don't know. And then the weekend after that, I will figure out what we're going to do. So with that, if you have any comments or questions, send us an email to info@defensivesecurity.org. You can find the show notes that we talked about today, or for the articles we talked about today, at our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. You can follow the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can follow Mr. Kellett on Twitter at Lurg, me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, we will talk to you again next time, whenever that is. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week. Always appreciate everybody listening. Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.